The update based on the feedback of the last Skull Merchant design preview is finally out. So let's take a look at it, as it has a lot more things going on than before. So here are the entire changes to her, starting with the removal of the aura reading when hacking a drone as a survivor, which a lot of us deem to be way too much reward for survivors without any risk or counter for the killer side. The global detection power, red light green light, now detects survivors even if they are walking, so they have to stand still in order to prevent being tracked. This makes the power a bit better to use when you lose the position of a survivor while in a chase, or when you want to find them randomly during a match. Stealth drone scan lines are now visible, but the line will be reworked to show survivors that they can crouch in order to avoid the lasers. This will not change much, as you can already avoid being scanned if you crouch, but I do wonder if this is not a visual change but also a gameplay change, as it will make scan lines not work when placed on elevations, like in the table of Dead Dog Saloon. Now the craziest part is that she will get 2 drones. 5 of them will be deployable stealth drones, like before, and a new drone body which hovers directly over her shoulder, kinda like that one drone that appears when you do a memento mori with her. They also stated that the drone is not an AI controlled entity like Snug for the Helm Master, which means there will be less bugs. Stealth drones still work like before, including the dash attack from the previous design preview. However, the drone propulsion will no longer down survivors, only injure them. Any survivor hit with a drone propulsion will be tagged and tracked with a claw trap, and survivors can remove these traps manually with a held interaction, kinda like removing the mending status effect. The biggest change now is that Skull Merchant can shoot an EMP dart from her drone body, which will have a small impact area and that will down survivors that have a claw trap. However, this attack is useless against survivors without a claw trap. This makes Skull Merchant into a ranged killer with tracking and with a dash power as part of her drones. In my opinion, as a killer player, it sounds like something really fun to try out, but as a survivor, I fear that this will be one of the most complex characters in the entire game, which would not solve the issue she had of survivors not wanting to learn how killer powers work. I will share more of my opinion later in the video, so let's go back to her design preview. So for the killer side, first of all, you will start the match by trying to set up an area in order to detect where the survivors are using your stealth drones. Then, with the help of your global detection power, you can attempt tracking a survivor that is trying to repair a generator, or maybe catch a survivor trying to go for a save. Skull Merchant will now be, along with the Doctor, one of the best, if not directly the best killer to track survivors down around the match. Now, once you find a survivor with your tracking power, you use the stealth drone that you set up earlier in order to chase down the survivors and hit them with the drone propulsion. This will injure the survivor, attach a claw trap on them, gives them the broken status effect, and it tracks them on your radar. And now you get 2 choices. You can M1 the survivor like any other killer would, or you can try and hit them with your body drone. You charge up and release the second ability of Skull Merchant, and the body drone will fire a short to mid-range EMP dart with a small area of effect. Since that survivor has a claw trap, it will down them. As you can see, Skull Merchant's playstyle has completely changed, and is now similar to a combination of various killers in the match. You have the tracking of the Doctor, the dash drones like mini Victors that you can set up around the map, and the EMP dart, kinda like the Unknown's UVX, where you have to hit survivors twice with your power in order to down them. As a fan of killers with fast-paced gameplay, I am a very big fan of this new power, and I prefer it much more compared to the old version. But I do understand how many Skull Merchant fans will not like it, as it completely removed the previous playstyle, which was pretty unique, as no other killer works like she did with the scan lines. Now, as for the survivor side, you have various options to counter her. First of all, you can still hack a stealth drone by crouch walking to it, in order to send it back to the Skull Merchant. It seems like now, the drones won't automatically reactivate after some time, and she has to replace them manually like Hag and Trapper would. Or, you can choose to ignore the scan lines by standing still while repairing a generator, breaking a totem, or doing any other action. If you hear the global detection power notification, all you have to do is crouch walk or stop moving in order to avoid getting tracked. This will make urban evasion a good pick to counter her, kinda how Fixated soft counters the Cenobite. And if you see a stealth drone that is now being piloted, you have to loop tight in order to try and juke the drone. If you were hit with the claw trap, now your focus is avoiding the EMP dart of the Skull Merchant, very similar to how you would try and avoid the Unknown's UVX blast. And finally, if you feel like you escaped this killer or she is far away from you, you can choose to remove the claw trap. I believe the devs made this a held interaction, just like totems are. So if she comes close and interrupts your action, you have to start from the beginning, which makes sense because if it were not, it would be extremely easy to make her powerless. So that is all that changed for her, and as always, any feedback that you have for this version, you can send the devs directly in the link in the description. So let's talk about this version of the Skull Merchant and my opinion regarding it. First of all, I love that straight out of the gate, 3 of the problems the old version had were partially fixed. The first issue she had is the aura reveal when hacking a drone, which was way too much and gave survivors more information than the Skull Merchant could dream of, as she had no way to interrupt survivors from doing the hacking minigame, which was super easy to complete and doesn't take long, and also benefits survivor friends way more than solo queue players. Removing the aura read was a good call. Then we have the second fix, which was the issue of her global detection power being too useless since survivors could just stop running. Now that they have to crouch or stand still, it means they physically have to change their playstyle in order to avoid being hit with this tracking thing. It will make this power even more useful in the early game and anytime a survivor is hooked or slugged. And the biggest change that they fixed is the problem of the Skull Merchant being way too good at slugging with the previous design. Before, she could set up drones around slugged survivors and pilot them in order to down survivors from afar, so she could pressure the entire map just by setting those stealth drones around key points. Now that the drones do not down survivors but only injure them, this puts Skull Merchant into the same position as Plague, Legion and potentially Kaneki, where the first hit will be easy for her but not as easy as the previous killers since you have to aim her drones. And now, you have to actually come to the survivors in order to hit the EMP, which prevents her from having global control like before. In fact, survivors can just stay injured since the drones cannot down you, making the Skull Merchant having to hit them twice. I do wonder if survivors can enter lockers in order to avoid the drone dash, because if they can, I fear we might get another artist situation where the counterplay is very easy, because at least the twins can hold the survivor inside the locker for some time. So in terms of fun, I really like how Skully has so much going on with her new power. However, this is a double-edged sword, because she will now become one of the most complex killers in the entire game, similar to Vecna and Dracula. So let's now think of it from a killer's perspective. She has a tracking radar as always, and the stealth drones around the map, so she works as a setup character with tracking. But now, she also has the global detection power, kinda like Doctor, so now you have a macro element to think on top of the setup part of your power. And then, she has the drone control power, which includes a dash power, so you have to play this like twins, where you control a second entity from afar, which requires macro knowledge once again, and you need mechanical skill in order to hit a survivor with the drone dash. But then on top of all of that, now you have a range attack power, which once again requires mechanical skill to hit and gives her the range killer status. And if she still keeps her undetectable on drone deployment and her 24 meters radius, that means Skull Merchant will be our very first setup tracking stealth dash macro range killer. The closest killer we have to this currently is Freddy Krueger, in terms of how many powers he has on his kit that are different. For a player who has been playing this game for years, using various killers, this is not a problem. But for a new player, Skull Merchant might become the hardest killer to use in the game, depending on how easy they make her drones control and how big the radius of the EMP attack will be. This, of course, can be a good thing, because if she ends up being strong, she already got the hard to play aspect covered, unlike the ghoul, and this also fixes the problem that she had of being brain dead easy to play in the past, as all you had to do is plop a drone and survivors will get injured automatically. But the true problem comes with the other side. One of the biggest critiques she had in the past was that she was way too hard to counter, which in truth was not correct, but it was easier to complain than to learn. Now, however, there are way too many aspects of her that survivors have to take into account, all of them different. You have to think of this as a completely casual player who does not watch DVD content and who has not read anything about this killer yet, nor played her as a killer. Once in a match, they will see various drones that have scan lines, so they will try to avoid it by crouching. Maybe they get curious and come close to the drone and find out about the hacking minigame. Maybe they won't, as this aspect of her power is not clearly explained for them. But now, this drone can actually be piloted by the killer and hit you, and it will have a different movement pattern compared to the killer, as it can also dash and most likely fly over obstacles, similar to Dracula's bat form. So now a survivor has to learn how to counter that drone in order to avoid being hit, and when they get hit, now they have to learn how to play against a killer that can zone them with a ranged attack, or learn in the first place that the killer has a ranged attack on top of all of that. And don't forget to stand still or crouch when this overloaded killer activates the power to track everyone on the map if they are moving. And by the way, stealth doesn't work against this killer. As you can see, this killer is way too complicated to learn, both in terms of the knowledge needed to counter her, but also the mechanical skill needed to dodge her stealth drones and her EMP attack. If this version comes to life, the only possible thing that will keep her on check is being hard to play for a lot of casuals, so she won't be as bad as the previous Skull Merchant. But outside of that, for experienced killers, I feel like she will be still a noob stomper with an insane kill rate, but not that strong against top tier survivors. Of course, it's very early to tell, as we haven't even tried this version of her, so all my assumptions I do based on my game knowledge and on facts, like is the case with Freddy Krueger being the deadliest character in the game according to Behavior's own statistics, and also according to Nightlight, despite Freddy being B tier at most in a lot of killer tier lists, with some content creators rating him as C tier. Killers like Vecna and Sadako are also great examples of characters with very high kill rates who are very easily countered against good survivors because those survivors know what they have to do against these killers. As the creator of the Killers Explained for Beginners video, and as someone who is working on an updated version of it, I will find it very funny if Skull Merchant ends up having a power description longer than Vecna, which I suspect is going to be the longest due to the items, and not because the power itself is complicated. I am curious to know what your opinion is regarding this version of the Skull Merchant, so let me know in the comments, and also let them know your feedback so they can keep refining this power. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a nice day.